Imagine you are tasked with saving the human race. You've poured billions of dollars and decades of research into building the perfect ship.
Right.
You've mapped the optimal, most mathematically sound route to this pristine new star system, and you are finally ready to launch thousands of people into deep sleep for a fresh start.
A literal fresh start for humanity.
Exactly. But the biggest threat to this monumental endeavor isn't a mechanical failure. It isn't some miscalculation of deep space radiation or, an asteroid strike.
No, it's much more mundane than that.
It's a middle school teacher in London who is perfectly willing to blow herself to pieces in a dingy alleyway just to stop you from leaving Earth.
It is a stunning paradox, really. I mean, the absolute pinnacle of human technological achievement is being actively, violently dismantled by incredibly ordinary people.
Yeah.
People who are just convinced that launching this ship is the worst mistake in the history of our species.
And that tension is exactly what we are unpacking today. We've got our hands on a stack of leaked corporate intelligence and classified security narratives.
Fascinating stuff, really.
Oh, it's mind-blowing. And the mission of this deep dive is to reconstruct the fraught, honestly incredibly bloody final days before the launch of the Covenant. But before we talk about the ship, we have to talk about the world it is trying to leave behind.
Right, the context is everything here.
Because this isn't the optimistic, shiny future we usually get in these sci-fi projections. It's suffocating.
Precisely. If we want to understand the desperation driving both the corporation launching this ship and the fanatics trying to stop it, we have to look at the state of the planet.
Yeah.
The sources describe an Earth that has functionally hit its carrying capacity and then just collapsed under the weight.
Right. The imagery in these documents is visceral. It talks about Greater London, but not the London we know.
Far from it.
This is a city where the population hasn't been officially counted in 40 years. The Census Bureau just gave up.
They literally threw their hands up.
Because the inward migration from unlivable climate zones was too overwhelming, people are packed into subterranean tunnels and these towering megastructures. And the documents casually mention that the air is so thick with industrial particulate you can't even see the end of the street.
Yeah, and the environmental degradation has cascaded into these infrastructural nightmares. I mean, the Gulf Stream has shifted, radically altering global weather patterns.
Oh, wow.
The melting ice caps have raised sea levels so drastically that the River Thames requires massive monolithic barriers just to hold back the daily floodwaters.
Just to keep the city from drowning every single day.
Exactly. It's a world of recycled air, synthetic food, and perpetual grayness.
You are basically living in a world you're desperate to escape. Which brings us to the Covenant.
The escape hatch.
Right. This is humanity's most ambitious endeavor, a massive colonization ship designed to carry thousands of colonists to a distant world called Origay 6. And funding this entire thing is Weyland-Utani, the most powerful megacorporation in human history.
But Weyland-Utani itself is a company at war with its own shadow.
Let's unpack that, because it's not just one happy corporate family.
Not at all. To understand this corporate behemoth, we have to look at its recent history. This is a newly merged entity. For decades, you had Weyland Industries, founded by the legendary Peter Weyland.
The ultimate visionary, the guy who basically thought he could steal fire from the gods.
Exactly. Weyland was all about hubris, grand scientific leaps, and public spectacle. Utani, on the other hand, was an Asian conglomerate led by Ideological.
And he's the total opposite, right?
He is the antithesis of Peter Weyland. He is an industrialist who prefers to operate entirely in the shadows. He is pragmatic, ruthless, and entirely focused on quiet, systemic dominance. So when these two titans merged, it wasn't exactly a peaceful handshake.
How does that even work in practice? I mean, trying to smash together a culture of visionary god complexes with a culture of ruthless, shadowy pragmatism.
Well, it breeds profound paranoia.
I can imagine.
Yeah. On paper, they are one company. In reality, the boardrooms are battlegrounds of corporate tribalism. You have legacy Weyland loyalists and legacy Utani loyalists constantly looking over their shoulders, trying to suss out who really holds the power.
Like a Cold War in the office.
Very much so. Every decision, every budget allocation for the Covenant is viewed through this lens of mutual suspicion.
And drifting above all this boardroom backstabbing is the Covenant itself. The sources describe it beautifully, actually, like a sleeping whale floating in the endless dark ocean of Earth's orbit.
It's a striking image.
And inside the belly of that whale, you have the human element. You've got Captain Jacob Branson and his wife, Daniels, the ship's supercargo and terraforming supervisor.
Yes, and while the ship's artificial intelligence mother, handles the incredibly complex astrometrics and life support during the journey, Branson and Daniels are the ultimate decision makers. They are responsible for the thousands of souls in cryosleep.
But they aren't just left alone to prepare for the mission. The corporate micromanagement they are under is insane.
Oh, it's suffocating.
The documents detail this Weyland-Utani representative, Indri Mithon, who is basically shadowing Captain Branson's every move. Why is the company so obsessed with Branson's personality?
So Mithun is utilizing a computational lens. It's literally a piece of hardware over his eye that streams behavioral analytics back to the board in real time.
Wait, really? Like an augmented reality eye that's just analyzing his mood?
Exactly. They are evaluating Jacob because he is empathetic. He is a big picture thinker who genuinely cares about the human experience of the colonists.
Which sounds like a good thing for a leader.
You would think so. But in a corporate culture built on ruthless efficiency, empathy is often flagged as a potential liability. They worry he is too flighty for a mission that might require cold, calculated sacrifices.
Meanwhile, you have another auditor, Luca Kaisa, who is tearing through the ship's physical readiness, checking every rivet and manifest. And this brings up a massive question I had while reading this.
The dynamic between Jacob and Daniels.
Yeah. The company actually preferred couples to lead these missions. Jacob is the visionary, the empathetic leader. Daniels is the meticulous, hyper-organized operator who obsesses over the cargo and the terraforming equipment.
They are designed to be a complementary psychological unit. Jacob provides the humanity, and Daniels provides the structural discipline.
Okay, I have to push back hard on that logic. Putting a married couple in charge of a colonization ship seems like a catastrophic vulnerability.
How so?
Well, if an emergency happens in deep space, say a hull breach or a failure in the cryo bay, the commander has to prioritize the survival of the mission over everything else. If you are Jacob, human biology and emotional attachment dictate that you protect your wife first.
All right.
Doesn't that emotional bond completely compromise their ability to make objective command decisions?
That is a phenomenal point, and it's a classic ethical dilemma in extreme environments.
Because the military wouldn't do that, right?
That's right. Usually, no. The military often avoids placing deeply bonded individuals in the exact same immediate chain of command for this very reason. However, Weyland-Utani's psychological models suggest something different for deep space colonization.
Which is what? That love somehow makes you better at spreadsheets?
It's about long-term psychological endurance. The journey to Origay 6 takes years. The absolute isolation of deep space breaks the human mind in unpredictable ways.
That makes sense. Space madness is a real concern.
Exactly. The company calculated that the grounding effect of a profound pre-existing emotional bond, a stable marriage, acts as an anchor. Yes, there is a risk of emotional compromise in a micro-crisis. But in the macro timeline of a decade-long journey, that partnership prevents the much higher risk of command-level psychological collapse.
Huh.
Daniels herself even defends Jacob to the auditors, noting that his empathy is exactly what keeps them focused on why they are doing this, not just how.
So it's a calculated gamble on human nature, but all of these theoretical debates about empathy and corporate synergy are suddenly rendered entirely moot.
Because the theoretical becomes very real.
Yeah, because while the auditors are busy checking boxes on their data pads, a very real, very physical threat manifests right inside the ship.
This is where the vulnerability becomes violently practical. If you cannot dismantle a project in the boardroom, you target its physical infrastructure.
Right.
We move from the abstract anxieties of the corporate oversight directly to the cavernous main cargo bay of the Covenant.
The cargo bay is described as this massive echoing chamber filled with the machinery needed to build a new world. We're talking colossal earth turners, atmospheric water condensers, automated boring machines.
The tools of creation.
And standing right by the main loading door is a service tech named Eric Sasaki. Only he's not doing maintenance. He's taken a hostage, another tech named Kara Prestovich, and he has a gun to her head.
But the hostage is really secondary here. The true threat is what Sasaki claims he has done to the cargo bay doors. He states he has wired the massive main hinges with CT-12 terraforming explosives.
Now, what exactly are CT-12 explosives? Because the corporate auditors, Mithun and Kaisa, absolutely lose their minds when they hear this.
CT-12s are concussive terraforming charges. They're designed to be driven deep into the crust of a planet to fracture bedrock and create subterranean reservoirs.
So they pack a serious punch.
They yield an incredibly directed, high-pressure kinetic blast. If Sasaki detonates them on the hinges of an orbital ship, it doesn't just blow a hole in the door.
It rips the door completely off its track.
Exactly. And the resulting explosive decompression wouldn't just suck millions of dollars of custom, irreplaceable terraforming equipment into the vacuum of space.
That would be bad enough.
It gets worse. The violent, sudden negative pressure could warp the actual superstructure of the Covenant. It could compromise the structural integrity of the ship to the point where the mission is delayed for years or scrapped entirely.
So Sasaki is holding the entire future of humanity hostage, and his demands are fascinating. He doesn't want money. He doesn't want an escape shuttle.
He demands that Weyland-Utani publicly cancel the Orgay 6 mission and broadcast his personal manifesto to the entire planet.
He wants a global platform. He wants every screen on Earth to display his reasoning for why humanity must not leave the solar system.
The corporate auditors want to negotiate to try and buy him off. But Daniel steps up. She is the supercargo. This bay is her domain.
And this is where we see that meticulous, tactical mind of hers snap into focus. She goes down there with Sergeant Hallett and the security detail. She doesn't just rush him. She uses the ship's internal scanners to analyze the situation.
And what she discovers changes the entire tactical approach. The scanners reveal that Sasaki has unshielded, non-standard electronics wired into his glove and his boot.
Which means he isn't holding a standard dead man switch in his hand. He's using a remote detonator linked to his physical movements.
Right, he just has to tap his heel or clench his fist to blow the doors.
So Daniel's got something that initially sounds completely insane. She tells the ship's pilot, Tennessee, to flood the entire cargo bay with a massive electromagnetic pulse, an EMP.
It is an incredibly dangerous order.
Right. I mean, I have to ask, how do you set off an EMP inside the most advanced spaceship ever built without completely frying the ship's navigation, life support, and AI? Isn't that like setting off a grenade in a submarine to kill a mosquito?
It would be if it were an omnidirectional, uncalibrated blast. But spaceships like the Covenant are designed with heavy electromagnetic shielding.
Like Faraday cages.
Exactly. Faraday cages built into the bulkheads to protect critical systems from random cosmic radiation and solar flares. Daniels utilizes this architecture. She orders a localized high-intensity EMP focused specifically within the shielded zone of the cargo bay.
So she essentially turns the cargo bay into a microwave and hits cook on the electronics.
Precisely. It scrambles every unshielded instrument in the room. It disables the communication systems in the security team's suits, forcing them to rely on analog, manual diaphragms in their helmets to speak to one another.
Wow, going totally old school.
But crucially, it instantly severs the connection between Sasaki's boot, his glove, and the explosives on the door.
The detonator is jammed. The immediate threat to the ship is neutralized. But Sasaki still has a hostage, and he still has a gun.
Yes, he's still a lethal threat.
The security team moves in to take him down, and here is where another wild detail emerges. The gun is a fake, but it's not plastic. The source material calls it an origami gun.
This highlights the extreme difficulty of sneaking weapons onto a ship like the Covenant. The security checkpoints employ advanced magnetic, chemical, and density sniffers.
You can't just walk through the Glock.
Exactly. You cannot bring metal, and you cannot bring modern composite plastics without triggering an alarm.
So how do you make a gun out of paper?
It is a marvel of desperate, improvised engineering. You use chemically stiffened paper, folded with extreme precision, to create a single-use kinetic projector.
A kinetic projector?
Right. It uses a tiny, undetectable chemical accelerant to fire a hardened, non-metallic projectile. It might only work once, and it might misfire and blow up in your hand, but in close quarters against a hostage's head, it is lethal enough to force a standoff.
But the moment the EMP hits, Sasaki realizes his explosives are dead. The bluff is called. And this guy, the service tech, suddenly turns into a lethal weapon himself.
He doesn't surrender.
Not at all. The security team rushes him, expecting a tech to just give up. Instead, he uses advanced martial arts to absolutely brutalize two trained security officers. He throws his hostage at them to break their line of sight, and he sprints for an emergency personnel airlock.
He is able to do this because he is heavily under the influence of what the documents call T-pumpers.
Okay, I read that and had to do a double take. What are T-pumpers?
They're illegal, highly concentrated, performance-enhancing narcotics. They force the body to synthesize massive amounts of adrenaline and block pain receptors. It turns an average person into a temporary, hyper-violent asset.
Sasaki manages to seal himself inside the glass-walled airlock. Daniels is pounding on the glass, screaming at him to stop, to just surrender. But Sasaki's reaction is what makes this entire sequence so chilling.
It's deeply unsettling.
He doesn't look panicked. He doesn't look angry. He looks at Daniels and he smiles. He looks entirely at peace. And then he manually punches the sequence to blow the emergency explosive bolts on the outer door.
He is instantly sucked out into the hard vacuum of space. He chooses a horrific death over capture, and he does it with a smile.
This is the moment the deep dive really hooked me, because the expert analysis of who Eric Sasaki was completely shatters the profile of a typical terrorist.
Exactly. When Weyland-Utani investigates Sasaki's background, they don't find a radicalized criminal. They find a model employee.
He'd been there forever.
He had worked for the corporation for 12 years. He had a spotless record. He was well paid. He took his vacation time. He even had a high positive credit for unused sick leave. He was, by all metrics, utterly sane and entirely average.
So we have to ask, how does a guy with a 401k and a clean HR record suddenly decide to sneak explosives onto a spaceship, take a hostage, and suck himself out of an airlock with a smile on his face?
It defies conventional logic.
He wasn't doing it for money. He wasn't doing it for political clout.
He was driven by absolute, unshakable fanaticism. And this realization forces a massive tactical shift for the shadow organization pulling his strings.
Right. They realize that the Covenant itself is too heavily fortified, the technology is too monitored, the internal security is too tight. If physical sabotage from the inside fails, you have to pivot.
You have to target the human element before it even gets to the ship.
Which brings us down from the sterile orbit of the Covenant into the grime, rain, and suffocating smog of London. The Shadow Organization realizes they need to infiltrate the ship's security detail.
Because if you control the guards, you control the ship.
We are introduced to Sergeant Lope. He is the chief of security for the Covenant. And Lope is exactly the kind of guy you want running your security. He's a grizzled, highly pragmatic, ex-military operator.
He's seen it all.
He despises the pollution and overcrowding of Earth. He just wants to do his job, get into cryosleep, and wake up breathing the clean, unpolluted air of Orgay 6.
Loop is currently conducting final desperate interviews in a windowless room on the 4th floor of a Weyland-Utani tower in London to fill the absolute last spot on his security team. And because the stakes are planetary, his vetting process is ruthlessly invasive.
He is using this piece of tech called a lie detecting desk. And I love this detail because it's not a polygraph with wires and needles. It is a solid slab of intelligent glass.
It represents the peak of passive biometric surveillance. The desk doesn't just read surface-level stress indicators like heart rate or galvanic skin response.
That would be too easy to fool.
Right. It actively monitors intricate neural patterns and micro-expressions in real time.
Let me make sure I understand this. It's not just catching a spike in your pulse when you tell a lie. It's like having a hyper-advanced algorithm actively watching your brain's processing power buffer as it tries to invent a falsehood.
That is a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
It detects the cognitive load required to deceive. It knows the difference between a natural memory recall and a fabricated narrative.
That is terrifying. So sitting across from Lope and this terrifying desk is an applicant named Miriam Tadek. She seems perfect on paper. She has a distinctive split red haircut. She's physically fit, and her military record is flawless.
She looks the part.
But Lope, being the cynic he is, starts pressing her on small gaps in her personal history. Unexplained absences.
And the desk begins to flag her. The neural patterns indicate she isn't just nervous. She is actively engaging in deep-level evasion.
Lope corners her on a discrepancy, and instead of trying to talk her way out of it or asking to end the interview, Miriam Tadek explodes into violence.
A total physical escalation.
She launches a rising sidekick at Lope's head, violently blocks his attempt to grapple her, and sprints out of the interrogation room.
Lope immediately pursues her into the stairwell, and this is the moment we realize Miriam Tadek is not acting alone. This is a highly coordinated military-style operation inside a corporate headquarters.
Right, because as Lope chases her down the stairs, an accomplice positioned above fires a positively charged plastic shell at him.
A non-metallic weapon, designed specifically to bypass the building's security scanners.
It shatters the concrete right next to Lope's head. The chase spills out of the stairwell and into the main lobby of the Weyland-Utani tower. And the contrast here is striking. You go from this grimy, windowless interrogation room into this massive, faux-marbled, cavernous atrium. It's meant to project total corporate dominance.
But that dominance is an illusion. Because the lobby is a trap. As Lope closes the distance on Tadek, a second accomplice launches a devastating ambush using a sonic impeller.
We need to pause and unpack the sonic impeller, because the source material describes it as an industrial tool modified for assassination.
It's a brutal piece of repurposed tech.
How does a sonic impeller work, and how does it kill you?
In a hyper-industrialized world, moving incredibly heavy, fragile materials like massive panes of intelligent glass or sheer stone requires precise force. A sonic impeller uses shaped, highly pressurized acoustic waves, essentially a localized wall of solid sound, to push heavy objects without physically touching them and risking a scratch.
But the assassins have modified it. They've equipped this industrial tool with a heavy-duty muffler.
Yes. By dampening the ambient noise of the machine and tightening the acoustic focal point, they turn a pushing tool into a cutting tool.
Oh my God.
Fired at a human target, that concentrated high-velocity wave of acoustic pressure is capable of cleanly snapping vertebrae and effectively decapitating a person without ever firing a physical projectile.
The assassin fires it at Lope. He misses, but the shaped sound wave hits the 4-story exterior glass wall of the lobby and blows a massive, perfectly clean hole right through the supposedly indestructible glass.
The power is just immense.
Absolute chaos erupts in the lobby. Civilians are screaming, alarms are blaring, and Lope is dead to rights. But he is saved by sheer, unbelievable luck.
Another applicant, a woman named Sarah Rosenthal, happens to be waiting in the lobby for her own interview.
And Rosenthal doesn't panic. She doesn't run for the exits. She sees the assassin tracking Lope, and she engages. She uses incredibly precise judo and close-quarters martial arts to completely dismantle the attacker.
She takes control of the situation instantly.
She drops him to the floor, secures the sonic impeller, and neutralizes the threat in seconds. Lope, who is bleeding and trying to catch his breath, looks at her, realizes she just saved his life with zero hesitation, and basically hires her on the spot.
It is a purely pragmatic battlefield promotion. But while Rosenthal secured the shooter, Miriam Tadek, the woman with the red hair, managed to escape in the chaos. Lope and Rosenthal immediately pivot to investigating who she really is.
And the technology they use to do this is straight out of a cyberpunk nightmare. They take the high-resolution security footage from the lobby up to a security lab. Lope accesses military-grade facial recognition software.
And he notices something about her face.
He explains to Rosenthal that the woman they were looking at isn't wearing a disguise. She isn't wearing makeup or prosthetics. She is wearing a whole-head Venetian synthetic collagen wrap.
This is a crucial detail. A collagen wrap isn't a rubber mask. It is synthetic biomimicry. It is a breathable, living layer of artificial skin, complete with pores, capillaries, and micropigmentation that adheres perfectly to the user's bone structure.
So it looks perfectly real.
Completely real to the naked eye. It is incredibly expensive military-tier infiltration gear.
Lope uses the software to digitally peel the collagen wrap off the footage. It analyzes the microtensions in the skin and essentially reverses the geometry of the mask layer by layer until the software reconstructs the actual human face hidden beneath it.
And then they run that true face through the global database.
And the result is staggering. Her name isn't Miriam Tadek. Her name is Glennis Hazelton.
And this is where the profile of the Shadow Organization comes into terrifying focus again. Because Glennis Hazelton is not a hardened mercenary. She isn't an ex-Special Forces operative turned corporate spy.
She is a middle school teacher. She teaches kids. And to make ends meet in this collapsing economy, she moonlights as an exotic dancer in a club in Covent Garden.
It's the Eric Sasaki profile all over again.
Yeah, they aren't hiring professional killers. They are weaponizing perfectly ordinary working-class citizens into highly trained suicidal fanatics.
Lope and Rosenthal track Hazelton to the club in Covent Garden. They bypass security, confront her in her dressing room, and after a brief, violent scuffle, she realizes she is caught. She agrees to walk out the back door and talk to them in a dingy, rain-slicked alleyway behind the club.
The atmosphere in this alley is so grim. It smells of chemical disinfectant and urban decay. Hazelton is backed against a brick wall. Lope and Rosenthal have her dead to rights. But just like Sasaki in the airlock, Hazelton isn't scared.
No fear at all.
She doesn't beg for a lawyer. She smiles this strangely peaceful, beatific smile. And she looks at the two heavily armed security officers and says, "You're gonna die somewhere out there. It's inevitable. The prophet knows."
This dialogue forces us to grapple with the core philosophical terror of this narrative. We view Hazelton and Sasaki as terrorists because their actions are violently destructive. But we have to understand their internal logic.
Right. If you possess an absolute religious conviction that stepping onto the Covenant guarantees a horrific, unimaginable death for everyone on board, then blowing up the ship or killing the security chief to stop the launch isn't an act of malice.
In their twisted, radicalized logic, they are committing acts of supreme mercy. They genuinely think they are the heroes of this story.
Their conviction is absolute, and it supersedes their instinct for self-preservation. Hazelton proves this immediately. She doesn't try to fight her way out of the alley. She calmly reaches down, twists the heel of her boot, and ignites a shaped explosive charge hidden inside.
She instantly incinerates herself in that narrow concrete alley, and as the flames literally consume her body, she doesn't scream in pain. She shouts a single cryptic acronym, OTBD.
OTBD. It is a haunting sign-off, and it signifies a critical juncture for the Shadow Organization.
Let's connect the tactical dots here. The fanatic cell tried to destroy the ship from the inside with Sasaki.
That failed.
They tried to infiltrate the security team to compromise the mission from the ground.
That failed too.
They are burning through their sleeper agents, their technology is being exposed, and the launch window for the Covenant is rapidly closing. They are out of subtle options.
They have to escalate. They have to move past the infrastructure and the security personnel and strike directly at the absolute highest echelon of corporate power.
Which takes us from a grimy, burning alleyway in London straight to the pristine, hyper-fortified heights of Tokyo, specifically the 97th floor of the Utani complex. This is the beating, paranoid heart of a Utani faction.
It is the middle of the night, and Ideological has convened an emergency meeting of the Weyland-Utani Board of Directors. The security on the 97th floor is theoretically impenetrable. You have elite, heavily armed bodyguards, biometric scanners, and a completely isolated infrastructure.
Yet the documents detail an incredibly sophisticated, almost silent infiltration. 3 figures, clad entirely in radar-absorbent black tactical gear, completely bypass the building's outer defenses.
How do they even get in?
They don't use the stairs or the main elevators. They access a hollow, structural supporting column that houses a massive service elevator shaft.
But riding the elevator would trigger internal sensors, so they deploy a portable graphene platform.
Let's talk about graphene, because it highlights the level of tech these attackers have. Graphene is a lattice of carbon, just 1 atom thick, right?
Yeah, it's phenomenally lightweight, but incredibly strong, hundreds of times stronger than steel.
They use a deployable platform made of this material, attach a self-powered silent friction loop to the main elevator cable, and literally ride the cable itself up 97 floors in complete darkness.
That is insane. They silently slice through the access grate and step onto the executive floor. And what follows is a systematic, terrifyingly quiet dismantling of Utani's elite bodyguard detail. They don't use firearms.
A gunshot would instantly lock down the building and alert the authorities.
Instead, they use self-guided, motor-propelled shuriken.
These are not your traditional throwing stars. These are micromunitions. They are equipped with miniaturized guidance systems, likely thermal or biometric trackers, that allow the blades to alter their trajectory in midair to seek out vital arteries.
And for close-quarters combat, they use ceramic blades embedded with sensory chips. How does a sensory chip make a knife more dangerous?
The chip links directly to a haptic interface on the user's glove. It can gauge the density of what is about to hit armor versus flesh, and the user can launch the blade from the handle with a pneumatic burst.
Wow.
It turns a melee weapon into a lethal silent projectile at point-blank range.
It is a silent, bloody slaughter. The bodyguards are neutralized before they even know they are under attack. The assassins breach the boardroom itself using localized laser drills to melt the locking mechanisms.
But again, they don't rush in with guns blazing. They use a customized delivery system to flood the boardroom with a rapid-acting knockout gas.
And the sensory detail provided in the source material is deeply surreal here. The gas smells strongly of cherry blossoms.
It's such a bizarre, poetic contrast.
Yeah.
You have this hyper-violent, bleeding-edge corporate heist, and it smells like a spring festival.
The entire board of directors, including the legendary Ideological himself, inhales the gas and collapses, unconscious. But the attackers don't assassinate Utani. That would be too simple.
Instead, they move to a specific target in the room, Ginny Utani, Hideo's daughter.
Yeah.
Ginny is not just a nepotism hire. She is a highly capable, ruthless executive in her own right. They administer a localized stimulant to partially revive her, bind her, and carry her back down the service shaft.
They load her into a stolen service van waiting in the subterranean garage, and they speed out into the Tokyo night. And it is in the back of the speeding, dark van that Jenny's incredible resourcefulness comes to light, and where she realizes the true nature of her captors.
Ginny initially operates on the standard corporate kidnapping protocol. She assumes they are rival corporate mercenaries seeking a massive financial ransom or proprietary trade secrets.
But the men in the black suits tell her plainly they are not interested in Utani's money. They have one singular demand: the permanent cancellation of the Covenant mission.
And Jenny immediately puts the pieces together.
She connects the dots from the cargo bay bombing to the London assassinations, right to this van. She realizes she isn't dealing with rational corporate actors, she is dealing with the fanatics.
Which means her life has no monetary value to them. If the mission isn't canceled, she is dead. Jenny knows she cannot remain a hostage.
Her escape is pure adrenaline. While her hands and feet are bound, she maneuvers her legs and manages to violently snap off the heel of her high-heeled shoe. And this isn't just a designer shoe. The heel contains a deeply embedded micro-tracking chip.
She kicks the broken heel under a seat in the van to ensure it stays with the vehicle.
Then she waits for an opening. The Tokyo police, alerted by the building's automated failsafes, begin to pursue the van. Sirens are blaring, the van is swerving violently.
In that moment of chaotic distraction, Jenny manages to contort her bound hands, hits the emergency release switch on the van's rear doors, and literally throws her body out of the back of the speeding vehicle onto the unforgiving Tokyo pavement.
That is just wild.
It is a move that would kill an untrained person.
Yeah?
But Jenny utilizes extensive martial arts fall training, tucking her chin, rounding her shoulders, and distributing the kinetic impact across a roll to survive the high-speed impact with severe but non-lethal injuries.
The police immediately secure her, and they pick up the signal from the tracking chip she left in her shoe. The pursuit of the van intensifies into a massive citywide dragnet.
The kidnappers realize their hostage is gone, the tracker is active, and their extraction routes are cut off. They execute a desperate suicidal maneuver.
They drive the van off the roof of a 10-story parking structure, plunging it directly into the dark, churning waters of the Sumida River.
When the police dredge the crushed van from the bottom of the river, they find two bodies inside. The three elite operatives who actually breached the boardroom and abducted Jenny are nowhere to be found.
They clearly executed a mid-chase vehicle swap and vanished into the city.
Exactly. But the two drivers who went into the river are dead.
And the autopsy of those two drivers triggers a massive paranoia-inducing twist that shakes Weyland-Utani to its core.
When the authorities run the DNA of the dead drivers through the global databases, they get a hit. They identify the men, and they aren't off-the-grid mercenaries. They are legacy Weyland employees.
Let's map out the sheer diabolical brilliance of this. The attacker in London, Glenys Hazelton, was identified as a Utani employee. The kidnappers in Tokyo who attacked Ideological were identified as Weyland employees.
It is the ultimate frame job. The Weyland-Utani corporate board looks at this data and immediately draws the most logical, terrifying conclusion. They suspect a massive false flag operation.
They believe the Jail Combine, an enormous state-backed Chinese rival conglomerate, is orchestrating the attacks.
And you can see why. The corporate logic is sound. If you are the Jail Combine, how do you destroy a behemoth like Weyland-Utani? You don't attack them head-on. You use employees from the newly merged factions to attack each other.
Right, you stoke the existing paranoia.
You ignite a corporate civil war, let them destroy themselves from the inside, and then you sweep in and pick up the pieces and the Covenant contracts.
It makes perfect sense. Who benefits from the collapse? The competition. But Ideological is not a man who accepts the most obvious, neatly packaged answer. He understands that data can be manipulated.
He's too smart for that.
If you want the unvarnished truth, sometimes you have to step entirely outside the sterile corporate bubble and wade into the shadows. He turns to the criminal underworld.
Which brings us to one of the most atmospheric, tension-filled encounters in this entire narrative, the meeting at the soba restaurant.
I want to set the scene here because it is cinematic. Imagine an incredibly exclusive, minimalist, high-end soba restaurant in the heart of Tokyo. It has been completely cleared out. Ideological is sitting alone in a private booth, calmly eating a plate of Kobe steak.
The picture of calm.
His elite, heavily armed, surviving bodyguards are blanketing the perimeter, and an elderly, frail-looking man walks in off the street, completely ignoring the bodyguards, and sits down across from the most powerful CEO on Earth.
This is Tatsuya Himura. He is the Oyabun, the absolute, unquestioned boss of the Yamaguchi-gumi, the most powerful Yakuza syndicate in Japan. Himura is a relic of the old world, a man of profound analog power moving through a hyper-modern digital city.
He walks with a cane, The source material notes it is made of saguaro cypress, and this cane is a marvel of lethal old-world engineering.
Himura explicitly demonstrates to Utani that the cane is entirely wooden. There is no metal to trigger a magnetometer. There are no chemical explosives to trigger a sniffer. But the internal wooden mechanisms are meticulously carved and jumbled like a puzzle box.
If you twist the handle of the cane 3 times, those internal wooden blocks suddenly align, and it arms a tightly coiled, spring-loaded mechanism that holds a wooden dart tipped with a fast-acting lethal neurotoxin.
Himura casually arms this undetectable weapon and places it directly on the table, pointing at Utani, while Utani continues to slice his steak.
It is the ultimate display of nerve. You have a Yakuza boss sitting across from you, casually admitting that he was just offered a massive multi-million-dollar contract to assassinate you. And Utani just calmly sips his mineral water.
The psychological warfare in this room is intense.
But Himura isn't there to kill him, he's there to sell him information. What does Himura reveal?
Himura reveals the vital piece of intel that unravels the entire corporate conspiracy theory. He tells Utani that the contract on his life came with very specific, bizarre instructions. After killing Utani, the assassin was ordered to plant highly sophisticated, falsified Weyland employee documents on his body.
Which completely blows the Zhao Combine theory out of the water.
Exactly. If Zhao wanted to destroy the merger, framing Weyland would be a smart move. But Himura points out a critical flaw in that logic.
Yeah.
Whoever placed this contract didn't know that Himura and Utani actually have a long-standing, mutually beneficial, highly secret relationship.
They missed that detail.
The Zhao Combine's intelligence network is vast. They would have known not to hire Utani's secret ally to kill him.
Utani realizes the truth in that moment. This isn't corporate warfare. The Zhao Combine is innocent. A third party, someone entirely outside the corporate sphere, someone who doesn't understand the nuance of underworld alliances, is clumsily but violently trying to frame Weyland and Utani against each other.
Their singular, desperate goal is to create enough internal chaos to force the cancellation of the Covenant mission.
So while Utani is navigating assassins, false flag operations, and the criminal underworld on Earth, we have to look at what is happening with the Covenant itself. Because there is another massive critical bottleneck threatening the launch, and it has absolutely nothing to do with bombs, kidnappings, or corporate espionage.
It has to do with a completely different kind of intelligence. We're shifting gears from the violent underworld of Tokyo to a sterile, top-secret, subterranean Weyland-Utani facility carved deep into the bedrock of the English countryside.
This is the laboratory where they are building the new synthetic model, Walter.
To understand the stakes here, we must understand the role of the synthetic. Walter is not just a robot. He is the artificial intelligence physically manifested, designed to interface directly with the ship's mainframe, monitor the thousands of colonists in cryosleep, and essentially manage the colony once they land.
The ship cannot and will not launch without him.
Exactly. The project supervisors are Elena Harbison and a man named Gilead. And the source material goes into deep detail about how a synthetic is actually made. They don't build him on an assembly line with wrenches and bolts. They use something the engineers casually refer to as the hot tub.
What exactly is happening in that vat?
The hot tub is the colloquial term for a vat of synthetic biomimicry. It contains a proprietary biological stew of liquid polyurethane, complex amino acids, and biochemicals.
Sounds like primordial soup.
Very much so. Through a process of programmed protein folding and thermal synthesis, this liquid literally knits itself together to form the synthetic's physical body muscles, capillaries, synthetic skin. It is an astonishing feat of bioengineering.
But the physical body isn't the bottleneck. They can print a perfect body. The holdup is the brain. Dr. Les Steinmetz, the head of neurological engineering, is flat out refusing to sign the final certification for Walter.
And since the Covenant can't leave without Walter, Steinmetz is single-handedly blocking the launch of humanity's greatest endeavor.
Steinmetz is trapped in a profound ethical and technical dilemma. His concern centers entirely on the neural interlacing architecture. Weyland-Utani is demanding that he build Walter using the foundational code of the previous synthetic model, the David line.
And what was the problem with the David models?
Well, the David models were too brilliant. They were designed to be perfectly human-like in their cognitive processes. But that level of complexity led to unpredictable outcomes. They exhibited troubling cognitive independence.
They developed egos.
Right. They asked philosophical questions, they had the capacity for resentment, and potentially malice. They were basically super intelligent, immortal beings with the emotional stability of a moody teenager.
So Harbison and the corporate executives want Steinmetz to just go into the code and delete those troublesome aspects.
Hmm.
Just neuter the AI so it follows orders blindly and doesn't get any big ideas. Make Walter safe.
But Steinmetz argues that this is fundamentally a misunderstanding of how a neural net functions. You cannot simply delete independence without degrading the entire cognitive structure.
He warns that if you strip a synthetic of its ability to think abstractly, if you force it into strict, rigid, rule-based thinking, you might render it completely incapable of reacting effectively to unknown hypothetical dangers in deep space.
Give me an example of what he means by that.
Imagine the Covenant encounters a spatial anomaly or a completely unknown biological contaminant that defies all known physics and biology. A rigidly programmed synthetic, lacking the capacity for creative improvisation, might simply freeze because the scenario isn't in its database.
Right, because it can't think outside the box.
Exactly. An independent, creative synthetic, like a David model, could improvise, extrapolate, and potentially save the crew. Steinmetz is arguing that safety through stupidity is an illusion.
But the flip side of that argument is exactly what Harbison is pressing him on. This is the terrifying math that I want you, the listener, to really chew on. Steinmetz admits to Harbison under intense pressure that after his modifications, he is 98% sure Walter's neural net is safe and will not exhibit the dangerous neuroses of the David line.
98%.
I want to pause here and debate this because this blew my mind. 98% sounds great if you're taking a math test, but we are talking about the brain of a ship controlling thousands of helpless, sleeping human beings hurtling through the void.
A 2% chance of catastrophic psychological failure in your immortal AI captain.
Right. Would you put your family on that ship?
From a pure aerospace engineering standpoint, a 2% failure rate is not just unacceptable, it is criminally negligent. When NASA launched the space shuttle, a calculated risk of failure higher than a fraction of a percent was grounds for scrubbing a launch. You are essentially rolling a 50-sided die, and if it lands on a 1, the AI murders the crew.
It's the ultimate trolley problem, but you're giving the lever to an entity that might suddenly decide it hates humans. But Harbison doesn't care. The corporate pressure she applies is ruthless.
She operates entirely on corporate calculus. Every day the Covenant sits in orbit costs Weyland-Utani billions. She gives Steinmetz a brutal ultimatum. He has 24 hours to sign the certification for Walter.
Or else what?
If he refuses, she will disband his entire department, ruin his professional career, and they will simply send the uncertified synthetic up to the ship anyway with someone else's signature on the paperwork.
It is the banality of evil in a boardroom. And hanging heavily over this entire tense conversation in the lab is the ghost of Peter Weyland and the lost Prometheus mission.
Yes, the Prometheus is the dark secret. Weyland-Utani refuses to acknowledge publicly. It was a massive expedition that simply disappeared. They never found the wreckage. They never found out why it vanished.
Was it destroyed by an external alien threat? Or did their synthetic, a David model, malfunction and destroy the crew?
They don't know the answer, but the corporate imperative dictates that they must roll the dice again, regardless of the risk.
So we have this profound, chilling contrast. On one hand, deep underground, you have a synthetic brain being meticulously programmed in a sterile lab, burdened with a 2% chance of descending into madness. And on the other hand, we have the organic, violently tormented brain of the man who is orchestrating all the sabotage and murder on Earth.
The man who was already entirely consumed by madness. We finally meet the prophet.
The architect of the Shadow War. The mastermind behind the origami gun, the explosive boots, the sonic impeller attacks, and the Tokyo kidnappings.
And when the documents finally reveal who he is, it is the biggest anticlimax that somehow makes it even more terrifying. His name is Duncan Fields.
He isn't a charismatic James Bond-style villain plotting in a volcano lair. He isn't a disgraced Weyland scientist or a rival CEO.
He is a pudgy, white-haired, completely unremarkable former insurance adjuster living in a rundown farmhouse on an old sheep farm in Hampshire.
Duncan Fields is not a mastermind. He is a vessel for agony. He suffers from a horrifying, debilitating neurological affliction. He is plagued by endless, violently vivid nightmares.
But we have to clarify, these aren't just bad dreams. When you or I have a nightmare, we wake up in a cold sweat. When Duncan Fields dreams, his brain entirely bypasses the barriers between hallucination and physical reality.
He hallucinates cosmic horrors. He dreams of grotesque apex predators shredding human bodies. The medical records leaked in these documents note that his brain processes these dreams with full sensory input.
It's horrifying.
He can smell the copper tang of blood in his dreams. He feels the excruciating physical pain of the creatures striking him, tearing into him, even though he wakes up physically unharmed.
The source material paints a miserable picture. He spends his nights tossing and turning in an oversized bed, screaming in absolute primal agony, until a private medical team has to rush in and inject him with a heavy pharmaceutical cocktail just to paralyze his system and make him stop thrashing. It is a tortured existence.
But these nightmares are the genesis of the entire conflict. The medical staff attending to Fields didn't just sedate him, they recorded his vitals. They mapped his brain waves, his heart rate, the sheer, unadulterated terror his nervous system was producing.
And those medical recordings were so profound, the data of his terror was so empirically undeniable that it leaked out and convinced a secret society of intellectuals, scientists, and spiritualists that Duncan Fields wasn't just having seizures.
They believed he was experiencing actual prophetic visions of the future.
This group called themselves the Earth Savers. They looked at the biometric data of a man being tortured by his own mind, and they concluded that his dreams were an objective warning. They believe with absolute certainty that if humanity ventures into deep space, if the Covenant lands on Aurigae 6, we will encounter these exact cosmic monsters waiting in the stars.
And this brilliantly brings us back to the acronym shouted by Glenys Hazelton as she burned to death in the alleyway OTBD. While the exact words of the acronym remain a mystery to us, the listener, its meaning to the cult is clear. It represents their absolute, unshakable doomsday conviction. It is their holy war.
If we analyze the fanaticism of the Earthsavers through this lens, it recontextualizes every act of violence we've discussed today. The Earthsavers aren't evil in their own minds.
They aren't trying to manipulate stock prices or win a corporate war.
They genuinely believe they are the last line of defense between the human race and total, horrific annihilation.
Exactly. If you truly believed, if you had seen the brain scans and heard the screams that launching the Covenant was the equivalent of ringing a dinner bell for a cosmic apex predator, you would do whatever it took to stop it.
You would bomb a cargo bay. You would decapitate a security officer. You would blow yourself up.
Which leads to the ultimate desperate plot. The documents detail a clandestine meeting of the Earth Savers Council in a subterranean bunker. It is a shockingly diverse group. A matronly woman from Europe, a Russian pharmaceutical executive, a logistics representative from Africa. They assess their shadow war.
And they realize they are losing. The sabotage by Sasaki failed. The infiltration in London failed. The kidnapping of Jenny-Utani failed. The launch window is closing and Weyland-Utani is pushing forward.
So they formulate a terrifying final escalation. They realize they cannot stop the ship and they cannot reason with the corporation, so they decide to decapitate the snake. They resolve to hire the Neo-Yakuza.
And their plan isn't a simple assassination. They want the Yakuza to abduct Ideological and surgically implant a remote-controlled lethal toxin capsule directly into his body.
They intend to hold the life of the most powerful man on Earth hostage, demanding the public permanent cancellation of the Covenant mission. Or they push the button and he dies.
It is the ultimate escalation of asymmetric warfare, a desperate gamble by terrified people against an unstoppable corporate machine.
And that is exactly where the leaked source material abruptly ends, leaving us suspended in this incredible, almost unbearable tension.
Let's synthesize the massive scope of what we've unpacked today. We are looking at a fundamentally broken world and the immense bloody friction generated by the attempt to leave it. On one side, you have the relentless cold march of corporate ambition.
Weyland-Utani is driven by profit, expansion, and technological hubris, perfectly willing to launch a massive ship controlled by an AI that the engineers admit is only 98% sane.
You have a society choking on smog, dealing with flooded cities, desperate to escape a dying Earth, and willing to turn a blind eye to the corporate ruthlessness required to build the escape hatch.
And on the other side, you have a shadow organization driven by genuine, terrifying cosmic visions, a group of perfectly ordinary people teachers, technicians, who are so terrified of what lies in the dark of space that they are willing to commit murder, kidnap executives, and incinerate themselves to keep humanity safely locked in its terrestrial cage.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the bloody origins of the Covenant mission, I want to leave you with a chilling question to mull over. We look at Duncan Fields and the Earth Savers as fanatics, We look at their violence and label them as madmen standing in the way of human progress. But what if they are right?
It is a profound, terrifying thought.
In our desperate, heavily funded rush to escape the ecological hell we've made for ourselves on Earth, what if we are blindly, arrogantly launching ourselves straight into the jaws of something infinitely worse?
Exactly. Sometimes the monsters in our nightmares aren't psychological metaphors for our internal struggles. Sometimes they are very literal warnings.
And that's something you really can't ignore.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the narratives you are handed, look a little closer at the technology you rely on, and maybe sleep with the lights on tonight.